really begin with a very brief little examination of the question of what are the missions of art and culture in place. And I wanted to do this because I'm confused about this myself, and I've been really feel like I've learned and changed and grown a lot in the 10 years that I've been working on this. I want to distinguish between instrumental ends of arts and culture, by which I mean arts and culture in service of some other outcome. And there are many examples of this. Economic development is an obvious one, and I really think it's understandable since the culture wars and the decimation of the NEA that, advocates for the arts turn to this argument, but the arts, are so great for other things, revitalization, economic development, job creation, and so on. And there's some other instrumental arguments out there, like it's really great for kids to learn, visual art and music because it makes them better mathematicians. So those are instrumental arguments. I myself did my very first piece, The Artistic Dividend, around exactly this issue, artists' contributions, hidden contributions to regional development. And I still believe everything I said in there, but I think I have a bigger perspective now. And also I would say in Anna, my creative placemaking study, very much working with our clients at the NEA, we also really stressed largely instrumental outcomes. And those include animating public and private space, rejuvenating streetscapes and structures, improving local business and public safety. But we also tried to emphasize some of the intrinsic, special missions of the arts, like bringing diverse people together to celebrate, inspire, and be inspired. And we really tried to stress arts and culture at its core to really protect that. And I've always been so pleased that the NEA has chosen to put that arts and culture at its core in all of its sort of headings for its Our Town program. I also want to say, I don't know if the NEA people are here yet, but I want to just say that it's so thrilling to be here because we've had this amazing championship for 4 or 5 years by our National Endowment for the Arts for this wonderful experiment, building on work that had happened before, but really extending it, helping to develop Art Place, and just igniting all over the country all kinds of things that are happening, even when doesn't get funded. People say, we're going to do this anyway, because it's just such a great idea. So can we just have a little round of applause for the NEA? But what are the intrinsic missions of arts and culture? And I've really come to deeply respect these, even though I kind of knew them always because I always loved all art forms and practiced some of them. But these are some of them that I would put on a list: beauty, emotional insight, innovation, social and political critique, which I think is so, so important. I could probably spend an hour and a half talking about famous examples of where an artist, like artists who drew cartoons about the Star Wars idea where Reagan was going to build a shield over the earth, are largely responsible, historians say, for the fact that the public in general rejected the whole idea. Just amazing. Yeah. Spiritual aspiration, bonding, the idea of cherishing your tradition and passing it on to further generations, and bridging between cultures, sharing and learning about other cultures, and so on. And then I would also add this wonderful idea of the expressive life, which is Bill Ivey's term, our former NEA chair, and in his book, which is cited at the bottom here, he has a cultural bill of rights, and the most powerful one is this idea of everybody's right to an expressive life. There's also a very wonderful study out of Rand called The Gifts of the Muse, reframing the debate about the benefits of the arts, and I really recommend it to all of you if you haven't read it. And it really does go deeply into many of these functions of arts and culture. I wanted to give an analogy, which is kind of in a way, poking fun at some of our arguments about economic development outcomes, but I think it's really very instructive. I have friends who've been very involved in the community clinic movement, community health clinic movement around the United States, which has really transformed many, many communities, mostly urban, mostly poor communities, by providing a place for people to go for health care that's not the emergency room. And it's been very, very successful. And I could imagine people going to their state legislature or city government and sort of saying, we really want you to fund these community clinics because we do wonderful things for the community. Our presence there means that there's traffic on the street, there's less crime, people go to the drugstore and other local retail. Our small business restaurants are saying they're getting more activity, and you should fund us because we really have this wonderful impact in our community. And I can imagine back the legislators or the mayor saying, but isn't your job to improve people's health? And what evidence do you have on that basis? And I'm just putting that out there because I think that it's dangerous for us to only argue for arts and culture on the basis that it's instrumental to other ends, and that we have to be able to articulate what it is about arts and culture that is what people love. And I would also say I've done a lot of work on scientists and engineers and, medicine, and they don't go to the legislature and make these arguments. Legislators know what it is that they're, doing for our society, but I don't think that's true for arts and culture, and I think that's one of our projects for the next 10 years or so. So the first question I wanted to pose this morning is, since we've been all talking a lot about evaluation and struggling to understand our impact, I would like to invite you to give examples from your own communities or other cases where you were able to document any of these intrinsic outcomes from your arts and cultural activity, and or where you really feel that there is a need or a potential to do so. So I'm really hoping people will have some good examples of this. And I'm just going to walk around the room and hand you the mic. So who would like to start? Yes. And could you also please stand up and kind of face the room and tell people who you are and what your place is?
My name is Maria Rodriguez Winter, and I'm with the Sofia Quintero Art and Cultural Center in Toledo, Ohio. And our center is located in a very urban area where there's been lots of prostitution, a lot of gang activity. And one of the things that I did to reduce prostitution along a busy highway, there were two buildings that had perhaps 3 feet of space between the two buildings, and that's where the prostitutes would go in and do their job. So what I did is I sealed up the area, but with brick, and then I had this beautiful artwork of tile that was the Virgen of Guadalupe. And then above that, I put the 10 Commandments. And it's been there for, I don't know, maybe 10 years. And it's worked.
That's great. And did you ever use this as an argument, for anybody, to support the work you're doing?
Actually, I have.
Great. Fantastic. I see a hand over here.
Morning. Alphonse from Central Falls. I'm resident in Central Falls for the last 10 years. I work in there for more than 25. And as director of the very little program, volunteering program, as a painter, teacher, I started the program in 1995, delivering classes on spring to summer for free. And I was graduated in Colombia in fine arts, music, voice education, and I was taught in painting, art, drawing and painting. So I plan to give it for free, these classes in Central Falls, because no programs at all, only one program, the name was Channel 1 from the city. But this program only was very oriented to the youth and from the first generation in Central Falls, which was not Latino. When I became there, only 7,000 Hispanics in Central Falls. But year to year, this population growing until now is 62%. But I've seen that progress of the population. Until that time, nobody, even the government, didn't take care of that community because it's two cities in one city. The Latino community, workers in factories, offsite, and the founders. That's what I call the community who's given me the opportunity to come into this country, the founders in Central Falls. So I started to give the program because the kids doesn't go to any program, especially Latino, because they just come into this country without the language. I started to learn English in the first 8 months when I come into Central Falls. And I started to offer my programs to the director. I say, yeah, it's fine, it's okay. So I started to exhibit my first collection of drawings and photographies from Colombia. And after that, the kids and the family started to come in. because the Latino kids come into the library and stay offside waiting for their parents or going inside to do something, but they don't have any activity. So that's why I found this program, the New Millennium Art Factory. I put it as factory because what I say, this is the sign of Central Falls, factories. And the families coming from that endeavor and that environment. So the program is starting to be for the kids only on Saturdays, but the parents come in to bring the kids on Saturdays, and they stay outside. I say, why you stay outside? But some parents say, because I can be in the class. It's for kids. So time to time, the parents is starting to be involved in the program without even planning. So myself, I was surprised at how one program, a little program for kids, becoming a family program, which is right now. So even people from the, say, the third age being there, from Latino community and even American community. So the change is this: show to the authorities, to the government, how when a little program themselves, because it's not me, it's the family. They do the program, not me. I just be some vehicle. So they use me, so it's fine. So I've been there for 19 years doing this program, and that's, I think, the Spanish community started to change themselves, their own perception, because from our countries, they don't have this kind of education. Not every family had the opportunity, like me, to get a scholarship in my country for 10 years in fine arts. So that's why they are not influenced by the art. So I think they need it as part of their spirits, get the art to life. So now Central Falls had this program, continues, but as I said yesterday, the big organizations, the government still don't see these people. Somebody here and the panel say, is a lot of invisible programs and people. I am part of the invisible part of programs, but I'm very proud to be invisible there because my community seen me, see the program, do the program, and is still doing now. So that's, I think, what is the change.
Thank you so much. I wanted to just underscore a few things about what you said, because in the large project that Ann Gadwa, Nicodemus, and others and I did on California's arts and cultural ecology, we discovered that there were many, many cases like this, and that these organizations are, by and large, really undercounted in the Cultural Data Project, at least in the California data, woefully undercounted. And we actually had to use the IRS data to benchmark the data that they had. One thing we did find from the CDP data, which had data on the number of volunteers for each organization compared to the number of paid staff, that these kinds of organizations had huge numbers of volunteers to paid staff. So the biggest museums and performing arts, they have 1 volunteer for every 5 paid staff. Small organizations like this have 7, 15, 35. We couldn't even, reliably estimate it at small levels. And what does that mean? It means if we value arts organizations by the size of their budget, we're really not understanding their impact. So the impact of having volunteers and people themselves teach in these organizations, nobody's paid, yeah. They're a whole group of teachers in Santa Ana, barrio writers. They're teachers, they give their time, and they have a budget of $5,000 a year, but they have a huge impact on spoken word of kids in Santa Ana. There are just so many. So I think I wanted to just relate that to some of the problems that we have with indicators and measurement in this field. And also just say that the interdisciplinary nature of your center is also very, very typical of these small community-based immigrant and ethnic groups that tend to work across all these art forms. And I just saw a really interesting study from the Foundation Center that multidisciplinary organizations are the least well-funded by the nonprofit arts foundations in the United States. Okay, good. We have some more people on the stage. Try to keep your interaction real.
So 3 ideas come to mind. One is Kip Bergstrom from Connecticut, Deputy Commissioner of Economic Development. I have the Office of the Arts, but also have innovation, the tech entrepreneurs. And it struck me that there's a lot about the ecosystem for tech entrepreneurs. There's an ecosystem for arts, and we're getting better at measuring places and measuring projects, but we need to measure the ecosystem. And one of the things would be the mix of small and big. A tech ecosystem that was all big firms wouldn't work, and that's intuitively obvious to tech entrepreneurs. It doesn't work in art either. But I think we have to be careful about false dichotomies like instrumental versus intrinsic. So we put all of our art funding into placemaking. You would think, because we're in economic development, it has an instrumental bias, but we worked an outcome table with Wolf Brown that was all about intrinsic value, about social bonding and social bridging. So the actual intentional work that the projects are doing is really trying to be intentional about their intrinsic value, and we trust the collective wisdom of a whole bunch of intrinsic value creating place. So I don't see those two as necessarily in conflict. But the thing recently that got at this intrinsic value to me most poignantly, NEFA, New England Foundation for the Arts, just funded an exhibit at the Mashantucket Pequot Museum and Research Center just down the road. And it's about Native arts, and it's contemporary practitioners of Native arts, just exquisitely beautiful art from their Native traditions. And the chief of staff for the Mashantucket Pequots was speaking at the opening, and he talked about the fact that the current practice of Native art was a determinant of federal recognition of the tribe. And part of me says, why should some federal bureaucrat be able to decide whether a tribe is a tribe or not? So there was that. But that it is essential to the definition of their identity as a people, as a nation. And it just struck me so powerfully. I thought about it all weekend, and I've asked them to take the lead in teaching the rest of our nations, because Connecticut is a state of 100 immigrant nations that followed the First Nation. Teach them about placemaking from the perspective of the Native American experience, because I think they understand it better and more intuitively than anyone else does.
Thank you. That's really great. I also like to recommend my study with Marcy Rendon Ojibwa, writer, poet, playwright, called Native Artists. It's based on very extensive interviews with artists in Minnesota, and it very much emphasizes the connections to healing, to community, to tradition, and everything else. Who else? Oh, there are all kinds of people.
Hi, I'm Monica from Sculpture Space up in Utica. We're a Rust Belt city. We're a 38-year international artist residency program. I just wanted to respond to this because we had this amazing project. So the way that we demonstrated this was through an artist project. An alumni came through, and there was a building that was to be demolished on our grounds by the city. So she did a project in the building before it was demolished. Then it was demolished. The city came. Of course, they didn't plant grass. They just gave us gravel. You know, the grounds kind of looked like hell, but it's okay. And then she came up with a second project where she built a sculpture on the hill called Transparent Home, basically from some of these materials from the dilapidated house. So that's kind of a standalone sculpture, you know, object. So her third iteration of this ongoing piece is called Trace. So what she did is she got maps of the neighborhood, and all along our sidewalk, she mapped out where all the old foundations of the buildings were. And we planted 3,000 narcissus bulbs in a community plant that obviously come up once a year and then go away. So I've been thinking a lot about this idea of placemaking, and place as like imaginary and metaphorical more so than even tangible, because for like WaterFire, to me, the place that the volunteers and the spectators and the participants make up is really a place more than the river or the fire or whatever. So for Anne's piece, Trace, when we did it, we had a lot of people from the community come help us plant. We had maps, we had brochures, but the newspaper obviously ran a story and the TV ran a story. And what happened the next day is people came down from all over the city who said, I grew up here, there used to be a grocery store here, my neighbor was here. So we documented it, we basically interviewed them and had little video transcripts. But it just seems to me this idea of demonstrating it, the ways we demonstrate it was actually the art piece itself. And as an artist residency program, our mission, we really just follow our artists. So I thought it was just a, you know, kind of unusual way to, you know, and it's the beauty of it is it's revisited every year, right? So it can constantly, we can reinforce it and grow it in a way that's really organic to the piece. So.
Thank you. Great examples. I can think of some other too. Did you have your hand up? Okay.
I don't want to have my back.
So my name is Adriana Mendoza, and I'm a graduate student at the University of Maryland, getting my master's in landscape architecture. Sorry about that. And right now I have 5 months until it's complete, and I'm trying to explore how public art can be a vehicle to visualize community identity during a transitional period of urban redevelopment in Anacostia, which is disenfranchised neighborhood, and Kimberly Driggins briefly gave you an overview of Anacostia yesterday. And there are two concepts and ideas that I just wanted to share with you, just food for thought. And number one is this idea of root shock, which the psychologist Mindy Foley Love has defined as this emotional disconnect that happens when people are uprooted from their communities. She particularly focuses on African American communities and the effect of urban redevelopment on those communities, and that arguing that even if we do, say that to the population that you can come back to these areas that we've redeveloped, that those connections, those intangible connections, have been lost and severed. And so, what is our responsibility as landscape architects, as urban planners, as architects? What is our responsibility, our ethics of trying to mitigate, that feeling of hopelessness? And so another concept that my professors keep on bringing up to me is that oftentimes in these underserved communities, most people, the demographics are renters. And so that connection to land, they don't own that land. So if we can use the public realm, which is often not public, how can we reimagine using that public to really give ownership and create, that's what I'm trying to do is, I'm not trying to solve the world, which my professor has told me I'm not going to be able to do in this short amount of time. That'll come for another day. But how can this be a tool for government agencies and for designers and artists to really rethink, this transitional period of new population coming in, inviting them, and opening up a dialogue between the two, so that we can kind of mitigate those tensions that will occur. And this is an exploration, so I don't have the answer, and I won't have for many, many years. But thank you.
So much. I want to just make a really quick comment and say that in our creative placemaking study, we found this amazing case from Portland where a staff member in the Department of Transportation thought maybe we should have artist-designed transit stations, and maybe more people would come to them if we consulted the community and asked the community what they would like to see, the station express about their community. And on the north side of Seattle, in a neighborhood that was heavily Japanese American, and by the way, this guy, we told the whole story about how he had to go all the way to the Department of Transportation in Washington because the engineers said, well, we're not spending money on that, on art or consultation. But anyway, this community said, we want the station to tell the story of our incarceration in the desert during World War II. And you can go read what we've written about it. It's very brief, but it's amazing. They even have a reproduction of the newspaper headlines, alien ouster urged now, that they've reproduced in bronze in this station. So you can imagine what this means to this Japanese American community, mostly elderly people, but they're, the other generations too that live in that community. So thank you both for those.
My name is, you can always hear me. My name is Shawn Meisel, and it is my honor and privilege to raise funding for the Rose Kennedy Greenway, which is a 1.5-mile linear park that runs over where the Big Dig was in Boston. So I'm going to tell a story about another park because I'm new to Boston as of February. We need park rangers, so I've been writing some grants looking for funding to get the park ranger program started for the Greenway. And I interviewed a number of constituencies. One was the Sergeant Lima out of Boston, and he came to my office in full regalia. And I was asking him, what are the features of a good park ranger, and what characteristics do we need? And I asked him about various areas and why they were safer than others. And I said, take the public garden, for instance. why is the crime lower in the public garden than in the common? And he said, and pardon me, those of you from Boston, because it's beautiful. Have you seen it? It's beautiful. So that's my point about what beauty does for crime and for changing an area.
Hi, I'm Colin Hamilton with ArtSpace. We work around the country in a lot of communities that are successful in different ways and feel very good about themselves, but also in a lot of smaller places that don't necessarily. And I'm thinking we've been doing a series of projects in kind of post-Rust Belt cities, Hamilton, Ohio, Michigan City, Waukegan, and Elgin, Illinois, all the way to Minot, North Dakota. And when we talk about these intrinsic values, one of the things that's so clear in those communities is the sense of pride that art generates that other things don't, or don't as quickly. And to me, there seems to be two real key points to that. One is that these are often places where so many things have failed, and they fail over and over and over again. And the cities, the leadership is so cynical about the opportunity to do anything that one of the things that the arts community often has in abundance is a kind of resilience that you don't necessarily find in other parts of the city. So I'm thinking about Waukegan, Illinois, again, a very hard place. Most of downtown is empty. It's very spread out. It's been eclipsed by other more successful communities. And when we talked about doing a large project there was just disbelief, skepticism, cynicism about the whole thing. But through the process of making this project, that you could just feel the mood in the city government turn from a place that couldn't do things to a place that could do things. And that was really driven by a cluster of artists who just, they can do stuff. It didn't really matter that there were barriers because you figure it out. The other piece that I don't know how you would prove that this is true or not, but it seems intuitive to me that especially in these kind of post-industrial Rust Belt cities where there was such long-standing, deep-rooted community pride in their production, that they used to make things and that they don't anymore. And that artists have kind of taken over that production force in these communities, that I think that resonates really deeply in these places as something that they can still do what they once did in some form.
Thank you. That's great. Okay, I'm going to go here and then. And then I'm going to ask my other question.
I'm Janet Scott from Jackson, Mississippi, and one of the things that we do is work with artists with disabilities. And we started something about 11 years ago and partnered with VSA Mississippi, and now we manage a 60,000 square foot facility called the ArtsNet North Mississippi. But in it, we have a studio to where we have classes 3 days a week for artists with disabilities. And we have one paid artist who's the senior artist in residence, but we have numerous professional artists and up-and-coming artists that love to volunteer their time working with these artists. And now these artists that have been in the program for 7 to 9 years are having income. They are selling their work. And so it's sort of a workforce program also, because they are now able to make a living off of their artwork through festivals and open houses. And then this December, they will have 5 galleries, about 20,000 square feet, full of their artwork for sale for the first time. And so it's a program that we've created a place where artists with disabilities feel very comfortable in coming. Some of them had not left their house for 10 years before coming to this program. And they are comfortable in what they are doing. They are proud of what they're doing. And the city is now finally recognizing what they are doing in the city and taking these people and having them make an income for their work. So it's something that we've been really proud of and something that we hope we can continue.
Thank you. Thank you all. I really appreciate that. I'm sure everybody else in the room has something you could contribute to this too. Really, I would like these questions to be part of an encouragement for us to ask difficult questions, to listen, to think, and to me, it's always really exciting. I just learned a lot in this room, and little riffs kept going off in my head, and we just need to do a lot more of it. There's a tendency, I think, in creative placemaking to be very boosterist and very emphatic, and, we're so great, and this is... But actually, we're very vulnerable in lots of ways. We know that. We've seen it happen before in arts and culture, and so we need to be asking difficult questions, in a really generous and open, listening way. Okay, so the second question relates more to the more mundane evaluation questions. And I think that there are many challenges in evaluating the results of creative placemaking. We all know evaluation's important. We can't give away money, in the public sector, in the nonprofit sector, certainly in the commercial sector, without results. And yet, I think that our methods to date have been very crude. Of course, there's a lot of really great discussion going around about it, et cetera. I myself, was so distressed at one point about the kind of rush to rely on indicators created on the basis of existing secondary data sources that I wrote this provocative piece. Fuzzy concepts, proxy data, why indicators won't track creative placemaking success. Deliberately provocative. And I want to thank Ian David Moss for running it right away in his Create Equity website and coming up with this amazing graphic, which I just love. And I hope I can find the original and frame it sometime. And since then, it's been published by Grantmakers in the Arts Reader with lots of interesting responses, and now it's just been published in the International Journal of Urban Sciences, which, again, I thank Ian David Moss and the Grantmakers in the Arts for being willing to have it reproduced in several things. And I'm not going to go, I recommend you read it, but I'm not going to go through all the points in it. But I want to say that, there are so many problems, in my view, in trying to evaluate the outcomes of creative placemaking. I'm somebody who taught for almost 40 years in urban and regional planning as an economist, and it's just very hard for us to identify the area of impact, to get data that fits it, to get the data that's any good. But one of the biggest problems, and I'm just going to only ask this one question because there's so many other questions, is really, how do you know? Suppose you track what's happening in a bunch of indicators, and you say, wow, look at this is before we were there, and this is afterwards. Isn't that great? How do you know that the results are really a result of your intervention and not a lot of other things that are happening in the same place? And on the converse, I think this is particularly important because I think we've even heard reverberations of this in the room today. There are places where a creative placemaking effort might make a real big difference, but there are a lot of other negative things going on so that none of these indicators are going to look very good. And how do you deal with that? How do you make an argument about that? So I wanted to just use Anne's graphic from her art place study from yesterday morning as an example of this. And I think her studies are fabulous, by the way. And I also think, the work that Art Space has done over the years is just really totally amazing. So here's the graphic she put up. And, the kind of yellowish line is Reno and Washtenaw counties. That's the population growth over this period, 1980 to 2005, 2009. And what year was the Reno building built? 2000? Okay, it was opened in 2000. So she's basically showing here that, there was a big blip up in this neighborhood, population growth over this period, and attributes a lot of it to the building. So what's the problem here? Well, there are a lot of other things going on in that neighborhood and the city at the same time. So how can we really separate out the one thing? This is just a very fundamental problem in social science research. And in many other areas like community development, transportation, people have gone a lot farther to sort of parsing that out and taking these other factors into account. We just have to be really careful about that. So I thought that I would just ask you this question. In your creative placemaking efforts, have you run up against this problem that, some of the metrics or measures that are being used by your funders or by your organization to evaluate what you're doing, don't really show the progress that you would like to see? But it's because there are other things going on, and if your intervention wasn't happening, things would be a lot worse. But how can you really show that? So, do anybody have any examples of that, or you're free to change the question too if you want to.
I'm Deborah Johnson. I'm a local academic, and I'm on a state arts assessment commission. I don't know that I have a direct answer to this question or direct experience with it, but I do know that those of us who are interested in community-based arts projects, community-generated arts projects, have been looking on with horror and sadness and surprise that Five Corners in Queens in Long Island City is about to be destroyed. This is the mothership. 5 points, I'm sorry. This is the mothership of graffiti art, the mothership of mural making that is community-based. Certainly things like graffiti in this community-based mural projecting is by nature unruly, and it's absolutely considered the bastard child of the arts. And yet it's such a powerful communal force, and we should interrogate why it is in fact failing, why it has failed, why it's going to be taken away, without very much either understanding of how it failed or any protest that it's about to be destroyed. If anybody has any insights into that, I'd love to know.
Thank you. That is a challenge. Okay, I have a couple people over here. Do you want to just...
Hi, Marty Pottinger, Art at Work, Portland, Maine. One of the projects we did was in response, the police chief called and asked if we would write and direct a play, if I would write and direct a play with the officers in it for the high school students in response to at least 15 escalating rock and bottle throwing incidents where young, mostly African-born high school students were throwing at the police and at city workers after the police killed David Okot, an armed Sudanese young man who's about 28 years old. And the young people clearly identified the city as the issue, and the rumors and the accusations spread through all the universities in town. And there's more to that story, but for this issue, I think we ended up stopping. There were no more incidents, but the point wasn't a PR job, and I guess that is important to just say, is that the chief needed to agree that I could work with the officers more likely to cross a line as part of us agreeing to do the play with them. And so these officers were in a play called Radio Calls, and afterwards, scores of officers reported positive youth-initiated engagements about the play, where youth for the first time approached them, including many immigrant and refugee youth students. And I think the way to deal with it is that I figured out, and this happens all the time in the city, you take on an issue and they say, well, the community policing also did a program. I mean, it's not adversarial, but it's clear we're an ecology. And I think what's been useful is both generously encouraging putting everybody's name in the hat when you're talking about it, so you're not knocking anybody accidentally, but also by asking questions of the people who are giving you back the data in evaluation, and they start figuring out the connections themselves, and it has real glue and real lasting energy if they've arrived through being listened to, really, and asked particularly strategic questions. The impact kind of comes from them and the insight.
Hi there, Sara Lee from Sloverlin Audience Research. So I am an evaluator, and worse, I'm trained as an econometrician. So I'm going to give a super wonky comment or response to this. So I, having training as an econometrician, I'm really excited to see the conversation turn towards causality, and I think it's great progress for the arts field in general to be thinking about how we measure causal relationships between our interventions and the outcomes that we're focusing on. At the same time, throughout all of this conversation over the last couple of days, I feel like the traditional notion of causation is almost inadequate for what placemaking interventions do, that we keep using words like ecology, ecosystem, catalytic effect. And I feel like the way we think about causation is just inadequate to measuring those systemic impacts. And so it kind of feels like there's a moment for us in the research and evaluation community to really provide better tools for actually measuring the kind of impact that these projects have. So that's my little plea.
Hi, I'm Russ Rupert, and I just got an email last night from our city manager, and I can tell you we would have never got this email last year. He's going to do a talk next month. It's for the love of cities, the role of the arts in building communities. A year ago, that wouldn't have happened. And it's Springfield, Missouri, and I was especially interested in what Kip was saying because our mayor is very in tune with the arts, but needs to be helped along, I think, in some ways. And so the IDEX Factory is installation space. I wanted to start a contemporary art museum. I thought that's too big of an idea. I'll just do an installation space. And the city kind of helped us with this. Somehow Art Place gave us a grant. That, more than money, has given, I think, validity to the idea of arts in our community. And so at this point, also just yesterday, we're on their creative outlook for the city now, on the main master plan for the city. And for the first time ever, our city's talking about doing 1% for the arts. And so I think there's a lot of momentum that we're a catalyst for. And I think catalyst is a good word. And I think for the love of the city is the reason that I'm doing it.
Back.
Hi, I probably have a question that's similar to everybody else, so I'm not going to... Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Kathleen Shannon. I'm from Rhode Island, and I'm just a consultant. It's the maker movement, which is probably happening in everybody's space, and makers are a phenomenal asset to our country right now. And then there's the manufacturing, which is happening at the federal level to keep everybody in the U.S. manufacturing. So there's this low-tech movement of makers, which are preserving some of the arts that are being lost. And then there's this high-tech revelation around manufacturing and how we have to bring it back. And there's a great opportunity there, right in between, for the U.S. to be innovators in that space using the low-tech to high-tech. And I would love to hear people's kind of conversations around how to connect those two and get the language right, so that they start to influence each other, because I think it could be potentially dangerous as an undercutting measure, or it could be potentially an amazing opportunity for the U.S. in this kind of global competitiveness.
Thank you. These are all such great ideas. I just want to really respond to the last three people a little bit and just say I really think I loved what you said about creating better tools. I really think we need to do that. And I loved your story about the mayors, and the most brilliant thing I ever heard about arts advocacy, and I think it was in Minnesota, where we always use the economic arguments, but actually the people in Minnesota voted for this big increase, for our legacy amendment, and nobody ever used the economic impact arguments. People know what it is, but the most brilliant strategy I ever heard is just take a mayor to a theater performance. And just be careful which one you choose. But, often that's a strategy that our arts advocacy group is really trying to do. And I also really strongly endorse this idea. I think there are huge class divisions around arts, and especially for working class people. And that this is a very, very important thing. And I'm really proud to say my son runs a company called Four State Metals. He's an engineer. He's an artist partner. They employ 8 guys full-time, all young guys. And they make things, one-of-a-kind things in Brooklyn for artists, for art museums, for buildings. And it's just been fascinating watching them do it and build it. And I really know there's so much other stuff going on. Maybe one more comment, and then we'll just have 5 minutes left. Was there somebody else with their hand up that I walked by? No. Okay. Oh, yes, you. Yes, you did.
I'm from New Bedford, from this funny project called AHA. My name is Lee Heald. Nice to meet you. I'm sitting here actually with my colleague, Colleen Dwicki from UMass, and so she is our evaluator for our project, and we talk back and forth. The interesting thing about New Bedford is that a bunch of stuff happened at once. So there was the great Star Store development from UMass, the Whaling Museum grew, the National Park grew. I mean, it was this huge conflagration. We've been going for 15 years. And so when we look at our evaluation, we've done a very straightforward return on investment, economic impact. We've done qualitative data. But the thing that's interesting is that while everyone else can claim project-specific goals and project-specific or institutionally specific achievement, what comes out in our evaluation is about partnership, platform, diversity, audience, word-of-mouth return, participation in the event. And so while we've got all that great data about for every dollar the state puts in, we return $27, this high, great, the metrics are great, but what really gets us is that notion of collaboration and partnership and kind of coming together around a core vision that, because we have 68 partners, that all of the other people are supporters and part of how we build our network, but we really are the network, and that has distinguished us and really given us a lot of energy.
Thanks. I think that's a really good point to end on. And I would just say that, for Ann and I, doing this creative placemaking project was just so fascinating because basically we pitched to the NEA that we would go out and find successful cases, pretty much completed cases. And we found so many things we didn't expect. We found so many of them initiated by a single artist, which blew our minds. And we also found these very complex partnerships. And we also had organizations tell us how hard it was. And in one case, the Cleveland Gordon Square thing, the three partners, which were Community Development Corporation and 3 theater companies, they worked, they each said they put about a third of their organizational time in for 3 to 5 years to make the thing work, which is a big tax on your time and energy. And so choosing the right partners and learning how to work with them and learning how to listen what their concerns are and take them seriously, not just try to get them onto your agenda, that is just such a big challenge. And I think this is one of the greatest things about the creative placemaking movement and why I think it's going to really last, because these partnerships have been formed, because people in arts and cultural organizations have walked out of their door and are working with other people in their community. And they're not necessarily doing it because it's going to be good for them, but it turns out to usually be really good for them. And the partnerships between the public sector and the nonprofit sector and even the commercial sector, I think it's just been a really brilliant, wonderful thing. And thank you. You made gave us a wonderful case study of that. Okay, thank you. I hope this was really enjoyable. And at the end of the day, we are going to have a panel, but we're not going to be a talking heads panel. We are going to basically listen again. So if you have something that's cooking in your head all day, just be ready to share that with us at the end of the day. Thank you.